right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the court?
My name is Zachary Clark. My last name is spelled C-L-A-R-K.
And what do you do for work, sir?
I'm a sergeant with the state police, sir.
And how long in total have you worked for the Mass State Police?
Approximately 7 years.
And in what capacity do you currently work?
I currently work for the Norfolk District Attorney's Office.
In the detective unit, is that correct?
That's correct.
And how long or when did you begin working with the Norfolk County SBDU?
February of 2023.
And you're a sergeant currently within the state police, is that correct?
That's correct.
And when you initially joined the Massachusetts State Police, did you undergo any training?
Yes, I did.
And can you please describe to the jury, generally speaking, what that training consisted of?
Yes. I attended the 83rd RTT, or Recruit Training Troop, with the state police, hosted in New Braintree. It was approximately 6 to 7 months in duration. It included criminal law, criminal procedure, motor vehicle law, defensive tactics, emergency vehicle operations, etc.
Now, when you initially joined the state police, where were you assigned?
I was originally assigned to the State Police Sturbridge Barracks, or C5.
And how long were you at the Sturbridge Barracks at C5?
Approximately 2 years.
And where did you go from there?
From there, I transferred to the Crime Scene Services section in 2020, and I spent 3 years in that unit.
And what specialized training did you receive in relation to that work with the Crime Scene Services section?
Upon entry to that unit, troopers assigned are put through an in-house training program hosted by the state police. It's the lion's share of a year. Begins with a history of the study of fingerprints, biology, morphology. It progresses to supervised casework, processing techniques, evidence collection, and culminates in a competency exam for any of the disciplines that the trooper is assigned.
Now, when you're working for the Crime Scene Services section, how are assignments made typically within that unit?
Typically, troopers work on an on-call schedule. They're given advance notice, and they're on call for 24-hour periods. Most often, if a call is received or a request is made for crime scene services during that call period, the trooper assigned responds.
And sort of geographically, as far as being on-call trooper is concerned, how is that sort of divvied up?
So I was assigned to the Maynard Laboratory. The Crime Scene Services section is organized by crime labs. Maynard encompasses a large area, upward of 50 cities and towns. Some of the more northern towns would be Lowell and Billerica, and it goes all the way down to Canton and Stoughton. The trooper on call for that 24-hour period covers that entire region.
Now, sir, were you working with the State Police Crime Scene Services section on February 1st, 2022?
Yes, I was.
And where were you requested to go on that date?
I was requested to respond to the Canton Police Headquarters.
And approximately what time did you arrive at the Canton Police Department?
Approximately 9 in the morning.
And who did you meet upon your arrival there?
I was met by the requesting officer, Michael Proctor.
And what was the purpose, or what was described to you initially as the purpose of you responding to that location?
The request was made for me to assist in documenting a search warrant that was being executed on a vehicle housed at the police department.
And who do you recall being present during your time at the Canton Police Department and during that search warrant execution?
Trooper Proctor was present. There was a forensic scientist from the crime lab, Maureen Hartnett. There were various members of the Canton Police Department. There were members of the State Police Crash Reconstruction Section, Trooper Joe Paul, to name one. There were members of the Norfolk SPDU as well.
And if you know, in addition to Michael Proctor, how many other members of the Norfolk SPDU were present during the search warrant?
I'm aware of at least 3.
And what was it that you were asked to document at that location?
Namely, it was Karen Reed's vehicle.
And where was that vehicle located within the Canton Police Department?
It was in the garage bay.
Now, can you describe to the jury the process of your documentation or memorialization of that vehicle that morning?
Yes. Typically, upon arrival, I would consult with the requesting officer to determine the scope of the search warrant. In that case, it was Michael Proctor. He described that the vehicle was being searched for a variety of things, to include biological evidence, communication devices, alcohol containers, receipts, infotainment center data, etc. He asked me to document the vehicle with digital photographs. I then consulted with the forensic scientist who was present as well to determine the order in which the vehicle would be documented and processed. I began by documenting the vehicle's exterior with photographs prior to any manipulation or movement, and then proceeded to document the interior and its contents.
Now, any items that were seized during the execution of that search warrant, how were they photographed prior to being seized?
They're photographed in place prior to being moved.
Now, what kind of instruments or tools do you use typically while photographing items for crime scene services?
The main piece of equipment we would use is a digital camera. We wear protective equipment, namely gloves and a mask typically, often a scale, so that the images can be calibrated to true size upon examination later. Sometimes placards or ruler tape we placed on items of interest or items that will be collected.
Now, on this occasion, you mentioned Maureen Hartnett from the crime lab was present there as well.
That's correct, sir.
And what did you observe her doing as far as any sort of documentation with relation to certain things or items or areas of the vehicle?
My recollection is that she was chiefly concerned with the exterior of the vehicle, namely the rear right corner, and she was looking for DNA and trace evidence, I believe.
And as far as, was there any delineation that you saw her place on the vehicle with respect to certain areas of the vehicle?
Yes, she marked various locations on the vehicle with ruler tape.
And is that something that you would photograph both prior to and afterward when she would place those stickers or labels on the vehicle?
The area would be documented during my overall photographs prior to her placing any placards or ruler tape. And then once those placards are placed, they would be photographed again.
Now, in addition to the photographs, what else did you do with respect to the vehicle?
I was also asked to process the front right passenger compartment of the vehicle for friction ridge impressions.
Now, what is a friction ridge impression?
A friction ridge impression is it's a replica or an impression of the friction ridge skin on the hands or the feet. Friction ridge skin is an evolutionary adaptation on human beings that allow for better grasp of objects. What makes it unique and significant to policing is that that friction ridge skin has unique patterns. They're formed through ridges and furrows or hills and valleys, and they're unique to every individual. In the hundreds of years that fingerprints have been studied, no two individuals have ever been determined to have the same fingerprints. Analysts are trained to examine these patterns, more importantly, the individual ridge events, and conduct examinations that can lead to identifications or exclusions.
Now, just briefly, can you describe for the jury that process of how you do that?
I would document the vehicle with photographs first, and then determine what medium would be used to process the vehicle. In this case, white fingerprint powder was selected. The particular area processed was relatively small. It was the front passenger compartment, interior and exterior. I focused on surfaces that were more conducive to friction ridge impressions. Certain surfaces are far more conducive than others. Typically, non-porous surfaces like glass, polished metal, dash surfaces are better for impressions, more likely to yield impressions than porous surfaces, which is items like paper or unfinished wood. The area was processed with white fingerprint powder, examined, and no impressions of value were determined to be present.
Now, just briefly, Trooper Clark, when you say no impressions of value were determined, can you explain to the jury a little more, expound upon what that means?
Analysts are trained to determine during the analysis phase if an impression is of value for comparison. What that means is whether or not the impression, if any, has enough quantitative and qualitative detail where it could be compared to a known impression or an exemplar and make a finding. In this case, there were no usable impressions.
Now, upon that initial documenting of the vehicle, were you asked to go anywhere else?
Yes, I was also requested to respond to 34 Fairview Road in Canton and take overall photographs of a scene.
And when you say overall photographs, can you describe to the jury what your understanding of that term is?
Overall photographs are essentially just like they sound. They're typically taken from a distance. They're not examination level photographs. They're general area photographs. This particular case, it was an outdoor scene. I was directed where to focus my attention, and I took a series of photographs of that area.
Now, did anyone go with you there?
Not that I recall.
And when you say your area, your attention was directed to certain areas, where was your attention focused?
The requesting officer explained that upon my arrival, I would see an area in the front lawn or close to the street at that address where a significant amount of snow had been partially cleared away near a flagpole. He asked that I take overall photographs of that area, given the lighting was preferable, and to focus on the front of the residence, that cleared area, and the street around it.
And Trooper Clark, what do you recall in reference to the snow accumulation on the area of the lawn near the flagpole at 34 Fairview Road on that date of February 1st?
My recollection is that there was a significant amount of snow present. Snow banks were apparent from what I presume to be plowing. There was an area that did appear to be cleared and heavily trodden by footwear and tires. Still, even in that area, there was a significant amount of snow with certain spots of grass showing.
Now, while you were there, sir, did you or anyone else do any sort of excavation of that front lawn area?
No.
Now, following that, where did you go?
I returned to the Canton Police Department.
And why did you return to the Canton Police Department at that point?
I had finished my assignment with 34 Fairview, and I was asked to return. I believe the forensic scientist was continuing to process the vehicle. At that time, I would re-encounter her and determine if there was any additional photographs required.
Now, in addition to the photographs that you took initially at the Canton Police Department, what else did you memorialize with reference to the vehicle that day?
They took general photographs of the vehicle, the contents. At one point, a bag was presented to me with evidence by one of the Canton officers.
Let me ask it this way, sir. At some point, you mentioned there was a reconstruction trooper who was present at the Canton Police Department, correct?
That's correct.
And so what, if anything, did you document with respect to that reconstruction trooper outside of the Canton Police Department?
Trooper Joe Paul asked while I was there to document a series of brake and acceleration tests with digital video that he was performing with the same vehicle. I was also asked to take photographs and video of the vehicle's backup warning system, which was activated as they performed some tests.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Dr. Clark, you with this. Do you recognize that?
Yes,
And what do you recognize that to be?
this is the crime scene photos.
And what's contained on that disc, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed both inside and outside the Canton Police Department with respect to Ms. Reed's vehicle, as well as the scene at 34 Fairview on February 1st?
I presume it is.
All right. Almost introducing them as an exhibit.
I'm assuming that that's all that's on the disc, and if that's the case, then we have no objection.
You've seen it.
I haven't seen that particular disc. We have received the photos in discovery. I'm not concerned about that.
With the court's permission, if I could just publish a few of those photos with your
Okay.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. May I approach the witness just
Yes.
briefly? I'm presenting you with 3 photographs to recognize what's depicted in each of those 3 photographs.
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize depicted in each of those 3 photographs in general?
I would describe these as mid-range and a close-up photograph of the vehicle's dash area.
And Your Honor, separately, may I call seek to introduce and admit as the next three exhibits?
All right, well, I'd like to do it as one exhibit.
ABC?
Please, yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2616. And Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to zoom in on the steering wheel just above the L for the Lexus sign. And Sergeant Clark, do you see what's depicted up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And from this photograph, just above the steering wheel on the right-hand side, what do you observe there?
Vehicle's odometer reading?
And is that what the odometer read as far as when you took this photograph outside of the Canton Police Station on February 1st?
Yes, it is.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 2617. And again, Ms. Gilman, if you could just zoom in a little on the center of that photograph. And again, Sergeant, if you could describe for the jury what we're looking at in this photograph.
This is a mid-range photograph of the vehicle's display screen, the center console, with the what I would describe as the backup warning system activated as the vehicle approaches a pedestrian.
And lastly, Ms. Gilman, the next photograph, which is 2618. And again, Sergeant, what are we looking at in this photograph?
More or less the same as the last photograph, sir.
Closer up image than the prior photograph, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Ms. Gilman, you can take that down. Thank you, sir. I have nothing further for this witness warning.
All right, Mr. Leonetti?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Trooper.
Good morning, sir.
Your earliest involvement in this case was on February 1st of 2022?
That's correct.
You ended up, and by the way, at that time, you were a trooper assigned to the Crime Scene Services section?
That's correct.
And that was in which town in Massachusetts?
Where I was assigned, sir?
Yes.
Maynard.
Maynard, okay. About a year later, you actually joined the Norfolk CPAC unit or the Norfolk Detectives Unit, correct?
That's correct.
And when you joined the Norfolk CPAC unit, Lieutenant Brian Tully was the supervisor of that unit, was he not?
Yes, he was.
You are still with that unit, correct?
That's correct.
So you've been there for approximately 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years.
That's correct.
And so you were there when Lieutenant Tully was removed as the supervisor of that unit, correct?
That's sustained, and folks are to disregard that.
No, if I could request an instruction.
Jurors, pay no attention to that question or answer. That is not properly before you with this witness.
Is Lieutenant Tully still the supervisor of that unit?
Yes.
I'm going to see you at sidebar for just a minute, please.
Okay, so going back to February 1st of 2022, you learned that Michael Proctor had called your unit, resulting in your involvement in this case on that date, correct?
That's right.
And Michael Proctor had requested that you go to the Canton Police Station?
That's correct.
At the time, were you aware that the Canton Police Station, or the Canton Police Department, I should say, had a conflict of interest with this investigation?
Objection.
Rephrase it. Rephrase it.
Well, were you aware, when you were called out on this case, that John O'Keefe had been found mortally wounded on Brian Albert's lawn?
I was advised of that fact upon my arrival.
Okay. And you were advised of the fact that Brian Albert's brother was a Canton police detective?
I did not know that.
All right. Still, it was the Canton Police Station and not a state police barracks where Michael Proctor instructed you to go, correct?
That's right.
Was he there before you, or did you arrive there before him?
He was there before me.
When you got there, where did you see Michael Proctor within the Canton Police Department?
Inside the garage bay.
And is that also called a sally port?
Yes.
And when you got there, was Michael Proctor the one to direct you to the Lexus SUV?
Yes.
And when you got there on February 1st, that was the first time that you laid eyes on that vehicle, correct?
Yes, it is.
There was no other investigator from the State Police Detectives Unit or the CPAC unit there with the Lexus SUV except for Michael Proctor, correct?
There were other investigators from the Norfolk District Attorney's Office present that morning.
In any case, you had no personal knowledge prior to your arrival of how long Michael Proctor had been with that SUV before you got there, correct?
That's right.
You have no personal knowledge about whether anyone was monitoring Michael Proctor while he was near the vehicle before you got there.
That's correct.
And before you got there, you had no idea how much access Michael Proctor had to that vehicle, right?
Correct.
Your assignment was to take photographs and to process the passenger's compartment in particular for fingerprints.
Correct.
And you did that.
Yes, I did.
Bless you. About a year and a half after that, on July 18th of 2023, you participated in this investigation again, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And that was because, in part, you had now joined the Norfolk CPAC unit, correct?
Correct.
And you participated in an interview of Colin Albert at the Norfolk DA's office, right?
That's right.
You knew at the time that Colin Albert was the nephew of the homeowner, Brian Albert? Objection.
I'll allow that. Did you know that at the time?
Could you rephrase the question?
Sure. At the time that you were called in for this interview and told that you would be participating in an interview of Colin Albert, you knew that he was Brian Albert's nephew, correct?
I was advised that prior to the interview, yes.
You conducted that interview along with Michael Proctor, correct?
Correct.
At the time, Michael Proctor was a state trooper in that unit, correct?
Yes, he was.
And you knew he was also the lead investigator on the case, correct?
He was the case officer, yes.
At the time of that interview on July 18th, before you began questioning of Colin Albert, had Michael Proctor revealed to you his connections with the Albert family? Reapproach.
Go on to the next area and see if you can come back.
Did Michael Proctor reveal to you that he and Kevin Albert had socialized together by drinking alcohol in his cruiser?
Sustained injuries, I'm going to ask you to strike that question. Disregard.
I need to be heard at sidebar.
I will hear you.
Sir, when you went with Michael Proctor to interview Colin Albert, you knew that the case originated on January 29th of 2022?
I was aware of that.
And the date that you conducted that interview was July 18th of 2023?
That's correct.
Did you ever ask Michael Proctor why he waited a year and a half to interview Colin Albert?
I did not.
Once that interview was concluded, one of the two of you had to write a report to document what Colin Albert had told you, correct?
That's correct.
And Michael Proctor, as the lead investigator, was the one to write the report, correct?
Michael Proctor wrote that report.
You did not write it.
Correct.
He chose the language to use in that report, correct?
Correct.
And you weren't standing over him while he was typing it up, correct?
Correct.
And he wrote that report to his supervisor without running every word by you, correct?
That's correct.
Did you ever review that report to check whether it was accurate?
Not before it was published.
And the only other thing I have for you, sir, is you were called to photograph evidence on February 1st. Were you ever asked to go to 34 Fairview Road on February 8th to photograph and document evidence supposedly found on that day?
No, I was not.
Were you ever asked to go to 34 Fairview Road to document any evidence on February 10th?
No, I wasn't.
How about February 11th?
No, sir.
And then on February 18th, nearly 3 weeks after January 29th, did anybody contact you to ask you to come out and photograph and document evidence that was supposedly found 3 weeks later?
Ask it differently, Mr.
Yes.
Netti.
Were you called out to 34 Fairview Road on February 18th of 2022 to photograph and document anything?
February 1st was the only date I was called to 34 Fairview, sir.
So the answer to my question is no, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Is there any follow-up, Mr. Lally?